Hi, my name is James Sanderson, and it's great to be with you today. We are going to start a series. It's going to be a long one on the book of Daniel. And the reason we're starting with Daniel is because we're trying to connect with the book of Revelation. And I believe that understanding the book of Daniel is going to help us to understand the book of Revelation. In fact, we're probably going to make a stop on the way and also talk about the destruction of Jerusalem in between the two books. So we're going to go over to Matthew 24 and Luke 21 and Mark 13. All right, and this is what I've entitled the book of Daniel, the God who rules the nations. And boy, that's so important, isn't it? Isn't it so important to understand and know that God rules this world and the nations that are in it? A lot of chaos going on right now. It always has been, Cain killed Abel. It's always been a tough world. It's a fallen world. We shouldn't expect anything less. But God's in control, and the book of Daniel is going to show us that. So, we do have a world of chaos. Some pictures of World War II here. Boy, 80 million people killed during that time. Could you imagine living during that time? That was a little bit before I was born. But that was a very chaotic time. How about the stock market crash in the early 1900s? And we've had some other crashes, not quite as bad, but we've had some times. Those are some things to be concerned about. Then you've got ISIS and all those other groups that are over in the Middle East killing people. Boy, it's always been a mess. And oh, hey, we got an election coming up, don't we? There's a concern for us, right? Who's going to be president? Which side are you on? Who do you like best? What's going to happen once that person gets into office? Lots of things to be concerned about. Just recent, we've had some towns just burning to the ground, literally. A lot of towns have been burned up. A lot of violence and anger and hatred going on. It's a concern for us. We've got the COVID, this pandemic that has went all around the world and killing people. And, you've got tankers that have been diverted and kept from other countries just recently. And then you've got all these job losses because of the COVID and other things that are going on. Those are things to be concerned about. And that's going to bring us to the book of Daniel. Daniel is going to help us with this. And whatever time you live in and whatever you're dealing with is going to help us. So, here's the purpose of Daniel. And these are the things that I hope that we get out of the book of Daniel. One is, I want us to learn our Bibles. We don't nearly know our Bibles as well as we used to, do we? No, we don't. We need to know them better, for sure. Okay? Second of all, we need to understand that God works the same way in the Old Testament as He does in the New Testament. Some people compartmentalize the Bible and say, well, God worked this way. This is how He operated in the Old Testament. Then when it comes to the New Testament, He's a whole different God, and He operates in a whole different way. The book of Malachi says that God does not change. And so we're going to see that there is a pattern. And that pattern is that He is in total control of our world. Oh, I need to know that, and so do you. So do you. So here's our memory verse, and I guess if there's one verse out of Daniel that I would want us to memorize or to know well, it would be Daniel chapter 2, verse 44, because it's going to talk about some kingdoms here. But watch what it says. It says in verse 44, it says, in the time of those kings, and we're going to see who those kings are, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it itself will endure how long? Forever. Forever. Oh, that is so important. So important. We've seen kingdoms come and kingdoms go, but this kingdom is going to put all those to an end, and this one is going to last forever. And this is the one that you and I can be a part of, and we need to be a part of, and I hope you are a part of. So this is an important verse. Hope you remember this verse. All right, so let's get into the history and background of Daniel. I ask people, do you like history? And a lot of people in church say, no, just not a fan of history. But then I'll ask them, do you like to read the Bible? Oh, yeah, I love to read the Bible. Well, you got to realize that the Bible is a history book. It records history, okay? And so you are constantly reading things that happened in the past. Well, to understand the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation and even the destruction of Jerusalem, we're going to have to understand our history. If not, it's not going to make sense. It's just not going to. So let's go. We're going to get a little deep, but I think I can keep you. And this history is important. It's all right here in the Bible. So let's see if we can't put it together. All right, so we're dealing with Israel. We're dealing with, there was the 12 tribes of Israel. They went into the promised land and they divided the land up, and this is where they parked themselves for many, many years. And the nation was united for a long time. But then they decided, well, we got to have some kings. So God said, okay, I'll give them to you. And their first king was King Saul, and they were still united. And then King David and King Solomon. But after King Solomon, something happened. They split in two. And the northern tribe went one way, and the southern tribes went the other way, right? And why? Because King Solomon had many wives, and he brought in many of their gods, okay? And it split the nation. And God warned them this would happen. He warned us way back in the time of Moses. So the nation splits. And what happens is you've got the 10 tribes to the north and the 2 tribes to the south. Okay? So that's how they split. And here are their kings. You've got kings to the north, and they're called Israel. They're also sometimes known in your Bible as Ephraim. And then you've got the tribes to the south. These are the 2 tribes to the south, and these are the kings of Judah. And they were always known as Judah. Now, in 722 BC, Israel, the northern tribe, is going to be hauled away. And none of this is going to take place during the time of Daniel. They're going to be gone. So they're never on the scene during the time of Daniel. Okay? They're hauled away into slavery by the Assyrians and spread all over the world. The southern tribe, though, is going to last a little bit longer. They were a little more faithful. And they're going to last until 586 BC. And Daniel's going to see part of this when they were still together. And he's going to see part of this when they were totally gone and also hauled into slavery. And he's going to see both sides of it. So he's going to be in between both. And that's going to be Daniel's time. Okay. So just remember, the northern tribe will not be in play during the book of Daniel. They're gone. Okay? And when we're dealing with a timeline, we have to understand that we're working down. Okay, so when you're in the Old Testament times, you're working down. This is the time of Daniel. You're getting smaller and smaller to the point of the cross. Now, once you get on the other side of the cross, then you start adding the years up, and you start going up. That's why we add years every time. Back then, they would actually subtract them. So one's working towards 0, and the other one is working away from 0. So Daniel is going to live during the time of 608. 535 BC. This is the writings of the book of Daniel. And remember, we're working down towards the cross. So there's going to be a lot of timelines I'm going to use, and you're going to have to understand in Old Testament this is how they work. Okay. So this brings us to King Josiah. This is where I want to start. This was a southern king. Okay, southern tribe. And here we can find his story in both 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. Let's look what it says. It says in 2 Kings 23, verse 29 and 30, it says, while Josiah was king, Pharaoh Necho, king of who? Egypt. Okay? So he's down there in Egypt, right? He's going to come up. And he's going to go up to the Euphrates River to help the king of Assyria. So they're both going to fight together, and they're going to fight what is starting to form is this Babylonian or Chaldean nation. They're going to fight them, okay? Now, as King Necho, Pharaoh Necho, comes up, and he comes up the side of Egypt, or Israel, what happens? King Josiah, he never inquired of God about this, goes out and fights him. Hey, don't be marching through my land. And what happens? He gets killed. And where does he get killed at? Megiddo. Okay, so you can see this right here. So here's the king of Egypt. He comes up, and where do we get? Have you heard this? Megiddo, Armageddon, right? Book of Revelation, right? This is where we find this at. This is a real battlefield. Lots of battles have been fought here. And what happens? King Josiah comes out to meet him. Don't go marching through my land. And King Josiah goes and gets himself killed. Okay? So, there's your king of Judah. And he dies in 608 BC. Okay? So there's your battle of Megiddo. That brings us to King Jehoahaz. Because they're going to put him in place of his dad. Okay? And we find his information in these verses. In 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. So it says, the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and made him king in place of his father in Jerusalem. Okay? So now he's king. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned how long? 3 months in Jerusalem. Then, watch what happens. The king of Egypt deposed him at Jerusalem and imposed on the land a fine of 100 talents of silver and 1 talent of gold. And the king of Egypt made Eclecum, his brother, king over Judah and Jerusalem, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. But Necho took Jehoahaz, his brother, and brought him to Egypt. Now, you want to talk about chaos. This is the land of the Israelites. This is God's people, right? Talking about us, God's people. Lots of chaos going on. So when Egypt gets done going to battle and fighting on their way back, they stop over in Israel again and says, you know what? We're gonna take charge here of your land. And this king that's in place, well, we're going to take him with us, and we're going to put a new king in place, Jehoiakim. Boy, a lot of changes in just a couple of months. Does it sound like our world? Yes. Yes, it does. It does. Okay, so they go up to the Battle of Carchemish. They fight. They come back, stop over in Jerusalem, in Judea, and then return to Egypt, taking King Jehoahaz back with them, and left King Jehoiakim in his place. Okay? So now Egypt rules Israel. They're not of their own anymore. Not good. So Josiah is gone. Jehoahaz is in. He rebels against Pharaoh. Goes up and fights the Battle of Carchemish. Then comes down. Jehoahaz is out. Egypt dominates Israel. And then Pharaoh Necho takes Jehoahaz to Egypt. And that brings us to King Jehoiakim. Okay, you follow me so far? It's quite a bit of history here, isn't it? Okay, so now we read about King Jehoiakim in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. So, Jehoahaz is gone. Now Jehoiakim is in place. So, this is what it says about him. In 2 Kings 23:36, it says, Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was, we won't even go over these names, okay? And he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Then we get to chapter 24. During Jehoiakim's reign, Nebuchadnezzar, king of who? Babylon. Now we're dealing with Egypt. Now we're dealing with Babylon, invades the land. So now, man, we went from being our own country, and then the Egyptians took over, and then the Babylonians come in and take over. And he became vassal for 3 years. So now he tells Jehoiakim, you belong to me. Okay? All right? For 3 years. So the Babylonians come in, and they come over and take over. Man, lots of changes, man. Well, this is crazy. Sound like our world? Oh, it does. It definitely does. Yes. All right. So Nebuchadnezzar vassals, Judah, and King Jehoiakim. Okay, you belong to us. All right, so now the Babylonians are running. You see all that happened in 608? I mean, there's a lot. That was a busy, busy year. Okay, all right. So he's going to vassal him for 3 years. But then he changed his mind. Who is this? This is King Jehoiakim. And rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. He's saying, look, you know what? I ain't paying your taxes and doing all this. Okay, all right. So the who? The Lord sent the Babylonian, Armenian, Moabite, and Amorite raiders against him. Who sent them? This was God. Is God in control here? Is he using other nations to go against Israel? He is. He is. And he sent them to destroy Judah in accordance with the word of the Lord proclaimed by his servant, the prophets. Prophets prophesied about this. Surely these things happened to Judah according to the Lord's command. Wow, in order to remove them from his presence because of the sins of Manasseh and all that he had done, including the shedding of innocent blood, for he had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and the Lord was not willing to forgive. Wow, that's pretty strong, isn't it? That's really strong. Do you see who's in control here? It looks like God's in control. Even though all this chaos is going on, the bottom line is God's in control here. And he's got a purpose. So, now we're going to move to 605 BC. And now we're going to come to the second battle of Carchemish. Okay? And the Assyrians are going to come in. And they're going to fight, right, with the Egyptians. And they're going to fight the Babylonians. But this time, the Babylonians are going to totally and fully dominate. And so what happens? Assyrians are gone. They're out of the picture. And what happens? Egypt, they go back with their tail between their legs. They've been defeated. So, at 605, Babylonians come over here, and they're going to deal with King Jehoiakim because he's rebelling. And they're going to come over and say, and this is going to bring us to our first exile in 605 BC. Okay? So, King Jehoiakim rebels against King Nebuchadnezzar in 605. Everything was good for 3 years. But then he starts to say, no, we're not doing this anymore. So, there's your battle of Carchemish. And that brings us to Daniel. Right there. This first exile. Daniel chapter 1, verse 1 through 7. Now watch what happens here. In the 3rd year of the reign of who? Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And what happened? The who? The Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hands. Was God behind this? Did he hand Israel over to the Babylonians? That's what it says, right? Along with some of the vassals of the house of God, and he brought them to the vessels, to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. So they took them back to Babylonian. Then the king ordered Aphanaz, the chief of his officials, to bring in some of the sons of Israel, including some of the royal family and of the nobles. This is going to bring us to Daniel. Youths in whom was no defect, who were good-looking, showing intelligence in every branch of wisdom, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge, and with the ability for serving in the king's court, and he ordered him to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans or the Babylonians. Same people. The king appointed for them a daily ration for the king's choice food from the wine which he drank, and appointed that they should be educated 3 years, and at the end of which They were to enter the king's personal service. Now among them were the sons of who? Judah, were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Then the commander of the officials assigned new names to them, and to Daniel he signed the name Belshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, and to Mishael, Meshach, Meshach to Abednego. Okay? All right, so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Daniel. That's how they got to Babylon. So do you see that the entire book of Daniel is recorded in the book of Babylon, in the nation of Babylon? Everything that takes place is going to take place while Daniel's in Babylon. That's where this book is being written. And how did they get there? They were hauled away into slavery. And it was set up by God. God is in control. Okay? So that brings us to Daniel. Now you know how he got there and what he's doing over there. Okay? Makes sense? Great. So, Nebuchadnezzar takes noblemen to Babylon in 605, and this is the first exile of Israel. Okay? So Daniel goes to Babylon. All right. Now, here's what I want you to see. There's going to be a prophecy. The Bible's filled with prophecies, and this is a really important one. Now watch this, and this is in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah is going to take place during the same time of Daniel. Now he's going to be still back over there in Babylon, or in Israel, before they were hauled away into slavery in 586. So Jeremiah's still back there. He's a prophet. God's talking to him. He's giving messages to the kings of Israel, right? And he makes this prophecy. Watch the prophecy. Jeremiah 25, 11 through 14. This whole country will become a desolate wasteland, and these nations will serve the kingdom of Babylon. How long? 70 years. But when the 70 years are fulfilled, I will punish the king of Babylon and his nation. Okay? So, here's a prophecy by Jeremiah, given by God, that in 70 years, Israel's going to be brought back. Okay? And then he says it again over here in Jeremiah 29, verses 10 and 14. It says, this is what the Lord says, when the 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. So he's going to bring them back into the land of Israel, okay, after it's been destroyed. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart, and I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I have scattered you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back to the place which I carried you into exile. Well, there's always hope, isn't there? Isn't there always hope, even though this nation deserved this and Israel got away from God? There's always hope. I'm going to bring you back. Now, that's a prophecy. Now, we're going to see in our next lesson this prophecy fulfilled. Okay? So, there's the Babylonians, and guess what? Some years go by, and we're going to come to another exile. Okay? Now, remember, for 3 years, King Jehoiakim, he was okay, but then he rebelled. And God sent raiders in, right? And hauled people away in that first year, but he left that king in place. Well, I guess in 597 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, has had it, and he's going to go and attack them again. So watch what happens. I'm coming back. And this brings us to another king, Jehoiachin. All right, and his information can be found here in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. So, Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. Wow, 8 years old, and he's doing evil in the sight of the Lord. Okay? Now, what happened? What happened is Jehoiakim is taken away, and King Jehoiachin, his son, is put in place. So he's going to take Jehoiakim back to Babylon with him, and Jehoiachin is going to be put in place. Okay? And he's not going to be there for long. Okay? So there's Jehoiachin. Right? Yeah, there we go. And this is the second exile. Okay. But things happen, and that brings us to King Zedekiah. Okay, now watch what happens. We're going to have a new king right away. It isn't going to be long. At the turn of the year, King Nebuchadnezzar sent and brought him to Babylon. So, King Jehoiachin, get back here. You're not doing good. You're coming and living with me, and I'm going to put a new guy in, and his name is going to be King Zedekiah, and he's going to be the next king in Jerusalem. A lot of chaos here. Can you imagine living in this town? Can you imagine living in Judah and having to deal with all of this and the chaos and other nations in control of you? And yet the whole time, God's like, I got a plan. I got a plan. I got prophecies. I'm going to bring you back. But you're going to have to endure some hardship while I'm working my plan. So, Jehoiachin's gone. And that brings us to King Zedekiah. And Nebuchadnezzar is going to take Jehoiachin to Babylon and put King Zedekiah in place. All right, and this is the second exile. And then King Zedekiah, he lasted 11 years, did evil in the sight of God, and all of a sudden he's going to rebel against Babylon, and King Nebuchadnezzar is going to go back a third time. He's going to lay siege to the nation, and he's going to destroy Israel. So here we go, 586 BC. Here they come again. And guess what? The tribes to the south are no more. And they will all be hauled away into slavery. And Israel's gone. God's people, God's promised land, and it's all gone. Wow. Now, so that's your history lesson. And that showed you how we got to Daniel. And next week, I want to show you how that fulfillment of the 70 years and God bringing them back is fulfilled. And this is going to be really important. But before we get there, I want to leave you with just 2 verses. And these are important verses. It's in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah took place before Daniel, about 200 years before. But he says in chapter 26, halfway through verse 9, it says, when your judgments come upon the earth, these are God's judgments. The people of the world learn righteousness. But though grace is shown to the wicked, they don't learn righteousness. Really? Is that how bad we are? That God has to bring judgment to get our attention? We don't learn anything when he shows us grace. When he's good to us and good to us and good to us, we don't seem to learn anything. But when he brings judgment down, then we learn. Is there a lot of judgment going on here? Is God bringing judgment down on Israel? And as we're going to see, he's going to bring judgment down on the Assyrians, the Egyptians, Judah, Israel, Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, Roman Empire, the Grecian Empire. No one is left out. This is how God operates. And he's saying, I'd love to show you grace, but you just don't seem to want to learn. So what am I going to do? I'm going to have to bring my judgment down instead. Now let me turn your minds to Revelation. Let's pull a little verse in Revelation here. In chapter 16, verse 7, and I heard the altar respond, yes, Lord God Almighty, true and just are your judgments. Is God's judgments right? Is it okay for him to do that? The altar responded, yes, it is okay. They are just and they are right every time. How in control is God of our world? I think what's going to happen here is when we go through the book of Daniel, destruction of Jerusalem, book of Revelation, that it's going to, in some ways, take God out of the box. Okay? Because what we've done is in our own minds, we put God in a box. We all do this. We say, okay, I've got God figured out. He can do this and he can do this. He can only go for this far, and this is how he operates. But when we come to books like this, just opens him up, and he is just everywhere and involved in all kinds of things. And he is an awesome, awesome, awesome God. I hope you see that in this book. So stay with us. Stay with us through this study, and I pray that you have been encouraged just as I have been. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time. God bless you.